proposal for FEMA for restoration projects funds. Kevin Miller will be presenting. And would you like to be in front or?
Well, I was going to ask you, where is it best for the people online?
You can go front if you'd like.
Yeah, you can go in front.
I'm happy.
So the purpose of this is to facilitate committee's members' discussion about the U.S. Department of Interior and Southwest Florida Estuary Restoration Team, SWERT, proposal to FEMA for restoration projects fundings. This relates to the Fish and Wildlife and Habitat Protection Priority number 3, assess and promote the benefits of the land, waterways, and estuary protection and habitat restoration. So take it away.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I want to get you guys, challenge you guys to zoom out to the 50,000 foot level, maybe more like the 150,000 foot level, way out, and think big picture about ecological restoration. I work for the Department of the Interior. I'm an ecologist. My experience is largely in restoration, but also in landscape ecology and large landscape management, and thinking about large landscape conservation, restoration issues. And I'm here working with FEMA. And FEMA, as you probably know, has been here since Hurricane Ian, helping the communities in Southwest Florida recover from the impacts of Hurricane Ian. And the Department of Interior and other federal agencies are part of a technical advisory group, essentially, called Recovery Support Functions. And we advise FEMA on a whole wide range of things. The Department of Interior is focused primarily on natural and cultural resources. And that's the group that I'm with, the Natural and Cultural Resources Recovery Support Function. But there are other agencies that are doing other things. They're advising on infrastructure, they're advising on economic issues, they're advising on social and health issues and so forth. And so what FEMA wants from me is to tell them what kinds of things they should be funding. And usually what we look for are connections to existing federal programs. So we all know there are lots and lots of existing federal programs that do restoration. The question is, what do you do? And don't just think about what restoration projects need to be done, but think about whether there are systemic or any institutional changes. I'm already hearing some, I'm from North Carolina. I'm hearing some really familiar ones about problems with permitting and difficulties in the actual implementation of projects. But so maybe there are those kinds of changes that are needed. So how can we back up? I skipped something really important. FEMA's primary mission is to assist communities in becoming more resilient and more sustainable in the face of continued climate change, increased frequency of catastrophic storms, and so forth. And when FEMA says resilient, they're not talking about resilience in the sense that ecologists think of it. Of course, that's a component of it, but they're thinking about social, economic, a much, much bigger picture resilience. Same with sustainability. They're thinking about resilience and sustainability of communities. And so some of that, it may not have anything to do with natural systems, or it goes beyond just natural systems. So I'm really challenging you guys to help me figure out what to tell FEMA about how you do ecological restoration, or how you approach it, how do you plan for it, how do you implement it in such a way as to make the communities more resilient and sustainable. And I think, for example, one of those is a fairly obvious one. Somebody mentioned, I guess Brooke mentioned restore, somebody else mentioned restore. So there's the work that's going on because of restore, on the one hand, and then there's the work that's going on because of SERP, the Everglades restoration on the other hand, and in between is Southwest Florida. So maybe the connections that we really need is a more of an institutional connection in helping people in Southwest Florida communities appreciate what's going on either side of them and doing things here that are going to have an effect on them, both whether it's an ecological effect on their ecosystems or whether it's an effect on them socially, economically, making a more sustainable economy and so forth. And so the approach is, did you put a second question on there, Nicole?
Just those two that you sent me.
Just that question, okay. I think the other question just had to do, I've already said it, had to do with climate change and increased catastrophic storms. So what you'll see, if you've looked at the agenda packet online, I don't think it's in the printed packet, but online, I sent Nicole a draft letter for you to put online that explains a sort of a strategy. I've been working here since Monroe, and I've started out mainly on cultural resource issues. But as I traveled around, I noticed all kinds of opportunities for ecological restoration and people doing ecological restoration.
Maybe they could apply the same analysis you did on the seagrass change.
Sorry,
Mute them.
I muted him.
We're muted.
And the letter is in the packet for everyone,
Oh,
Yeah.
it is.
and it is online for anyone that's attending.
And that, what that letter is, I started working with some Lee County folks and people with the Conservation 2020 land manager. They directed me to Rookery Bay. The manager there, Jeff Carter, and became familiar with the Southwest Florida Estuary Restoration Team and met Kevin Pallas, who coordinates that for Fish and Wildlife. And it was obvious to me that if I could find the people that were already doing ecological restoration, I knew that there were academics that were doing ecological restoration. Obviously, the NEP has been heavily involved in ecological restoration. And I found about SWORD. I could start with those people, develop a strategy for how to approach this to FEMA, and then present something to FEMA that might be something they'd be willing to fund. And I'm encouraging you, you'll notice in this letter, I'm encouraging you to think big. I'm not thinking about just individual projects. Maybe there are some big projects. In fact, the strategy that's described in that letter is what we came up with, what Jeff and Kevin and I came up with as think of it as a straw man. That's just where we are right now, but I'd love to hear other ideas. And so that idea, just really briefly, is that you pick the projects, the big projects that you know are going to be regionally significant, that have to deal with, over and over I've heard, and I hear all through my career, how hydrologic alteration is the number one cause of problems, and ecological restoration, first of all, is all about restoring hydrology. So they've suggested several very large scale hydrologic restoration projects, one of which I know that the NEP has been involved in, Yucca Pens. The other one is down further south, Picking Strand. And so maybe the strategy should be, you start with the things that you know are going to have a major benefit to the region that are shovel ready. And you ask FEMA for the funds to do those. And then there's a whole lot of projects that you know are at scale that are not quite shovel ready, but almost are. And so maybe you can move some of them into being shovel ready so that when other funding opportunities arise, you can take advantage of them. And then the third is just to rethink, is more of a planning question. And in my mind is often a question for academics to think about, what are we missing in this strategy? If we're just looking at individual projects, what are we missing? And so what I'm here to ask you about is partly as Nicole described in the blurb and it's in your packet, you know, are there specific projects, but you should know that the Southwest Florida Estuary Restoration Team will meet in 2 weeks. And they've been asked the same question. And they're going to propose which are are they these 2 projects that we've been talking about, or is it something else? Which are the projects? Which are the projects in the second tier list of close to shovel ready? But I'd like you guys to think bigger picture. And you should know that I've also done discussion with a number of people in academia, primarily people from Florida Gulf Coast. But also I've started to make connections with other institutions to get them thinking about how should we be looking at this in the big picture sense. But the bottom line is FEMA is intending to spend an awful lot of money on the recovery from Hurricane Ian. And it seems to me that when you look at the investment that these communities have made, the entire Southwest Florida region has made in conservation lands, it's obvious that there lies an opportunity for FEMA to continue with that investment, to invest in the community's sustainability resilience by investing in ecological restoration in some way. So with that, I'll open it up I'd like to, if we can have some discussion for whatever time we have. But similar to what Brooke said, that if you'd like to take this offline, my contact information is on the bottom of that letter. I also have some cards. I'll stick around for the rest of your meeting. So in fact, I meant to be here for the whole meeting and got stuck yesterday in Sebring. But I'll stay around for the rest of the meeting. So if you need to go home during the break or talk later, I'm happy to do that. Or feel free to contact me if you have ideas later. Yes.
Sorry, just real quick, and I might have missed this. I apologize. What is your time frame on this again? So you're drafting this, and you're looking like you're pooling together sort of ideas and concepts. So when's the rubber meeting the road and having to kind of?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So, but in practice, it's really more like tomorrow.
Okay.
I think that what Nicole said in the word is December and the only thing about December is that the SWORD team will meet on December 14th. And I'm expecting that they may submit a proposal for pieces of this sometime soon after that. So there may be a proposal for pieces ready in December. The same is true with Florida Gulf Coast. I'm working mainly with Janine Richards, but Janine pulled together a whole bunch of faculty members. There were probably 8 or 9 people at our meeting in September.
Yeah, a comment.
Yeah.
This is great to hear from you. I'm ready to. What my concern is been involved in thinking strand restoration since it started back in 2001, before it even started. And that really represents what happened to Southwest Florida. That was one of the things that went wrong. The Gulf American Corporation came in and developed both the United States, both in the other northern and southern United States. They also developed Cape Coral. And so we have these, and Brandon, I know, is dealing with a similar situation where you have this grid system of roads, canals, but no infrastructure, no stormwater treatment, no sewer, and that's our real challenge. And my concern generally is that post-Ian, we don't seem to have learned many lessons from that. And especially having managed land on Sanibel through the Conservation Foundation of Sanibel for many years. Sanibel was very resilient, even though it was completely inundated. Fort Myers Beach, different story. And my concern is how does FEMA and how does the federal government promote redevelopment with the lessons in mind that what we learned 50 years ago from the Golden Gate Estates, Cape Coral, other projects where there was really no forethought, no ecological consideration. And I know SWORD's doing great work, but I'm concerned about the interface between public policy, development decisions. I have friends, my brother Two people I worked with, they got flooded out because their developments were built in a coastal high hazard area, right near the Estuary Bay. And in one case, my brother near the Coosatch River. And when we had a 13, 14-foot storm surge, and this could be the new model. And if we're not careful, we could see the redevelopment of Fort Myers Beach looks like Miami.
Mhm.
And yet, again and again and again, so,
And I echo that concern, and I'm really glad you brought that up. And I'm hoping that one of the things that FEMA will learn, and that they have learned, is that you can't just, restoration doesn't mean you put back what was there.
right.
Restoration, restoration ecologists know that, especially in the face of climate change, you have to look ahead. You have to look at what's going to be there and think about how do you, now what?
And there has been discussions down in Naples about building a great wall to block off the interchange of title. So there's a group that's involved with the Corps of Engineers, it's called the Silver Jackets Group. Yeah, they were gonna build this big, huge berm there along Tamiami Trail. It would totally negate the positive benefits of big, huge transportation. So I mean, that's what I worry about, having been around here for 35 years now. That we haven't learned the lessons of the past and that we're going to repeat those.
And that's part of this institutional change that I'm thinking. And one of the power of having these interdisciplinary groups that are advising FEMA is that from the people that are thinking about ecology and restoration, we may be advising them about social issues that they're hearing about from other people as well. And that it makes it more powerful.
We'll go in real quickly and then I'll shut up, but let's go up to 100,000 feet. There's been reservoirs being built. C-44 reservoir has 6,000 acre stormwater treatment system. The C-43 reservoir, which I've been involved with wildlife monitoring, doesn't have any stormwater treatment. That's one of those projects that really could benefit from FEMA funding to provide the stormwater treatment before it's discharged into the estuary. And that's really not on the board. There's no funding for that. There's plans, people are talking about it, but it was never part of the. That's just zeroing in on that. But that now there's the EAA reservoir that's on the board.
That suggests another one of these general issues that dealing with hydrology is one thing, but dealing with stormwater and dealing with treatment of stormwater to make sure that what does get in the estuaries doesn't impair the estuaries. That's a bigger issue.
Kevin, we have another question.
Yes,
Just real quick, so Jennifer,
Yeah, because Jennifer.
So real fast, then it would be great to get a little bit of clarification on what sort of specific projects would be most appealing to these groups for consideration of funding, because if they're really looking for centralized boots on the ground projects that are addressing the point of impact, or if they would consider programmatic or broader scale projects to address sources or causes of some of the impacts that they see down in the ecosystems that we're trying to restore. So to give an example, one of the big hurdles that we're really trying to think about here and figuring out is how do we fund and support more green infrastructure initiatives upstream to allow for better stormwater infiltration and attenuation before it even gets out into these sensitive and more impact systems. And by doing that, reducing potentially the effects of surges and whatnot that might occur over what we're actually trying to address. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is sort of what is going to be, because one of the things that we bump into a lot is we see a lot of appeal for funding big projects that people can cut a ribbon and point at and have a big party about and whatnot. But that's just really one very small part of the overall equation, to your point. So I would love to get a little bit of clarity on that too. Like if we were to propose something a bit more broad scale, that was something that was more related to source control and source management than it was actual physical restoration.
and that's the beauty of this particular situation that we're in. FEMA does not have a preconceived notion. FEMA's preconceived notion is this mission of making communities more resilient. They then come to us, to me and the other recovery sport function people, to tell them, what does that mean? How do we do that? And I in turn come to you guys and SWORD and FGCU and others and say, you tell me, what do we need to be telling them? And my sense is that, you know, they know about, yes, there need to be individual restoration projects. Yes, some of them are going to be very large and have very big price tags, but are we doing the right things? And I think one of the reasons Nicole wanted me to come to this group today was to particularly tap into the people up watershed that where we know so much happens in the upper parts of the watershed that influence what happens in the estuaries. We tend to think about the estuaries and we think about the, you know, the direct habitat, the restoration of the seagrasses, restoration of oysters, and, you know, the exact coastal and about how the impacts affect the coast and how oyster reefs or intact dune systems like at Sanibel help protect the communities. But what about the rest of the watershed? Are there things that we should be thinking about in the rest of the watershed? And I'm absolutely certain there are. So what are they? And how should we approach this to FEMA? Do we have, look at that straw man and think, do we have the right strategy? Or how would you modify that strategy?
So from an area that is, you know, where you're talking about upstream and, you know, we're at the headwaters of the Peace River watershed. So some of the big issues that we're looking at trying to solve is, you know, obviously source control, stormwater. How do we promote, you know, the implementation of more green stormwater infrastructure and low impact development? It's one of those things where I don't know if, and you know, smaller municipalities or county governments have the support, you know, and the funding for trying to push this stuff to development communities. The other component of that source control is looking at, you know, how do we fund more septic to sewer conversions and things like that. So I think there's just a lot of, you know, fogginess as to how do we improve and streamline the process of getting those things to actually happen. You know, we talk about it a lot, but I'm not sure how much that actually occurs and, you know, how easy it is to, you know, acquire some of that funding to actually make it happen.
And there, so just so you know, EPA is really strongly promoting those ideas. And we're trying to, because of the structure that FEMA is working under right now with these different recovery support function groups, we're trying to integrate what we're doing more and more. And so their EPA has a project that they call watershed resiliency, where they're looking, it's largely looking at stormwater controls. They also have, oh, I just blanked on the other part. But anyway, their EPA and green infrastructure was the other thing I was going to mention, that they're promoting green infrastructure. And so we're trying to do things together. For example, in the East River, there's a project going on right now that the Department of the Interior is doing in the National Park Service, the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program, where they're helping plan throughout the East River corridor what are essentially stormwater controls, but promotion, green infrastructure and stormwater controls in the guise of parks and blueways and so forth. And it's trying to integrate the planning that EPA is doing, and it all is going through FEMA. So I think that these storm recovery situations give us an opportunity to do some of this integration, and hopefully we learn some lessons from that that can then be applied to normal day-to-day operations and can get the resources from the federal government out to local communities. That in itself, that's another one of the, how do we institutionally make improvements? We institutionally make improvements to communities by better connecting the federal government and better providing federal funding to communities that know what has to be done on the ground there.
Great. Gosh, I would. See,
We're out of time. I'm going to stay.
Yes,
So
go ahead.
I mean, if we have a minute, I mean, I just would quickly say, like, there's been work done for decades, the Southwest Florida feasibility study, which was done when SERP was envisioned. You know, we got very little attention to Southwest Florida, the C43 reservoir being, and Pickerington being some of the only projects we got on this coast. So at the time, the Corps and the water management districts made a commitment that they would take a deeper dive and do kind of a SERP phase, 2.0 or phase 2 or whatever. And we spent 10 years developing a plan to restore Southwest Florida that ended up going on a shelf somewhere. So I think there's some really good resources out there. I know since then, we've broken off pieces and we've advanced those. The South Lake County Watershed Initiative, the Shaw Harbor Flatwoods Initiative. Many people in this room are involved in these kind of mini Everglades projects that are in the Western Everglades that are outside of SERP, but are complementary to it. And I think we could advance some of those for more funding. They're not necessarily shovel ready. They're between a conceptual modeling down to engineering and design phase. And so they're close. And we could definitely use some support for that. And I just think that overall, like, healthier systems are more resilient systems. So hydrological restoration is part of us fighting water with water, like fighting saltwater intrusion with more freshwater flow outward will help prevent premature saltwater intrusion into areas. We'll try to stave off some of the impacts of that. And so there's just so much opportunity right now. The Florida Wildlife Corridor, the initiative by DOI, which I'm thinking of the name is like Southwest Florida. I forget what Coastal to Everglades, or I don't know. They just changed the name of it.
The
The
Gulf to
federal.
Everglades Conservation Area.
Yes, Gulf to Everglades Conservation Area. I mean, that's about the heartland too, and trying to focus on upstream and where are the opportunities to preserve natural areas and make sure that we maintain as much natural storage and retention. And the last thought is just that everything that we're seeing with the rainfall modeling, the most recent data from Southwest Florida is that everything is going to get much more flashy, wetter wet seasons, drier dry seasons, more focal rain bombs with other areas right next door being dry. And so all that shows what we've already looked at is that our current hydrological restoration projects need to be amped up for even more storage to mitigate some of those impacts from climate change with the changes to rainfall across South Florida. So I think we have a lot to offer, I think, amongst all the people in this partnership. And we could do a whole workshop. Maybe this is a Hicks or a spinoff where we could take a deeper dive on this, because the expertise in this room is kind of unparalleled with being able to offer you the input you're looking for. But there's also just a lot of existing work to build on that. We're not starting from zero. We've done a lot of this work for a long time. So,
and that argues for something that Jeff and Kevin and I realized when we started talking, because of there's this limited opportunity that FEMA's here doing this recovery. We need to get something in front of them right away. And that's the idea of doing whatever shovel ready that we know can be regionally significant. But the longer term, we need to think about what we do longer term. And we need to be really strategic about that and try to position it so that FEMA is interested in funding it.
Who else have comments to do?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2. Let's listen to those 3. We got 3 more comments and then we go for lunch. So let's make it short and very concise. Okay, go for it.
I'll do my best, but
Yes.
I can't guarantee. But I think Dave alluded to this, Brandon just kind of alluded to this, and I think one of the big problems is development regulation or the lack thereof.
Exactly.
And on Sanibel, we were fortunate that we had founding mothers and fathers that, I don't know if they had the foresight at the time, but our comprehensive land use plan is based on the preservation of the natural environment. And as such, we've built a really resilient community, and we've been doing low impact design on Sanibel since that phrase was even coined. And so I just feel like, that there needs to be additional regulations either coming from the federal, the state government, local governments, but there needs to be a stronger push. Because you can do all of these restoration projects that we're discussing, but what's the point if we have irresponsible development occurring that just negates all of those efforts? And so I feel like FEMA
with all the natural disasters that you all have responded to, you must have case studies of different communities that you've done recovery efforts in, those that would be like a low impact design versus a highly developed community, and make, you know, recommendations or requirements for development based on those case studies. So
And they should have hundreds of them. And in this case, they don't have to look any further than Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach.
yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
One
Good.
quick, and stop me right away if this already exists, but in terms of systemic change that would be helpful to get these projects going. It would be, and maybe this is your role now for us, but it would be great if there were a federal clearinghouse with an advisor who knows Southwest Florida or different regions that can say, hey, there's this NOAA money, this FEMA money, this EPA money that's coming up. That would be good for your project, because as a single person or two people in small municipalities that are looking for this funding, designing projects, manning projects, a lot of times the deadline is coming up in 3 days and you're just hearing about it and then the money is gone. So I don't know what your role is, but that's how I'm gonna start using you. Help me figure out what's fitting out the plate and
I'm
not
happy to
miss the
help where I
deadline.
can. It does exist. It's really cumbersome and you guys all know about it. It's called grants.gov.
Oh, that.
And so I mean, as somebody who was involved in grant management for most of my career, it's ridiculously cumbersome.
Oh, yeah.
But then that's the federal government, isn't it? There's so much.
But that's why it's fun to put a face on it, right?
Yeah.
Like to have a person who's a regional advisor who understands what the work that we're trying to do from, you know, Tampa to Everglades City.
And I think that's actually a good suggestion. That's something the federal government should consider, whether FEMA does it or FEMA might look at a long-term project where instead of having recovery support function teams that are set up for each individual disaster, they do something all-encompassing. That's going to last beyond a single disaster.
I can't help, but that is the position that we mentioned in our program update, that we work to submit to FEMA with the US EPA for technical community assistance specialists to be set up in the Hurricane Ian affected communities, who would be totally up on all the federal grants and actually work with community partners to isolate projects and help write those grants and get them submitted. So we actually wrote the CHNEP, the position description of what we think that should look like, and submitted it as a proposed option. And we are waiting to hear, it's been like 9 months now, whether that will actually come to fruition. So I keep checking back on it. I think that's the other thing. My experience is like, we put a lot of energy into giving input and then sometimes we never
Right.
see anything materialize. So it's hard to maintain momentum of engagement.
And is that position going to be Ian centric or looking broader scale and, you know, bigger and broader than that?
It would be funded through Hurricane Ian recovery funds. So it would be set up in affected communities. We asked for at least 2 for the 10 county area, because basically every county in our service area was affected to some degree by Ian. And we are still waiting to hear if those will get funded. But if they do, they would be embedded with the CHNEP, and we would work closely with them to make sure that they are working with all of the members.
Okay.
So I would even take it a step further than that and look just federal wise, because the NOAA Restoration Center money, the EPA money, all of those monies, how do we dovetail them to make them the most effective, looking at Everglades City to Tampa, for instance? And then I'm done.
And that's certainly what needs to be done. We need to, we're too compartmentalized stovepipe in the federal government, and we need to do this. Absolutely.
Okay, we got one more.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'd like to make a really brief one.
very briefly, yeah.
Yeah, I like your idea of having some sort of fork off of PICS to deal with this issue. In Manatee County, we have no other venue for doing work in the CHNEP air program area in Manatee County. I do have projects that would dovetail wonderfully with this. They're not shovel ready because I didn't know about FEMA opportunities. We're a little bit coastal focused in Manatee County for a lot of our restoration conservation estimates, but There are potentially several large and valuable projects in the
Bring your sandwich to your desk.
Basin of Manatee County that I could think of right off the top of my head that I haven't been able to advance because I had no venue to help me advance them, even internally. So I'll close with just that. And I agree with you about grants.gov and the value of the position that you're creating. I know how important it will be. And that's it.
John, and then you have the last word, Kevin.
This year we had a drought in the summer when we usually get rain. So when you're thinking about resiliency, don't just forget about that, because if that became a pattern, Florida's in for a huge need rain in the summer, didn't get it. So that's what a lot of people forget to think about. That's a really good point. Too little is as bad as too much. We're thinking all the time about too much. Now the whole landscape will change. Then we'll have fires. Yeah. And the fires get those, but people don't think we did. And the other is, there's an industry of stormwater drainage with creative engineers in it, and they really haven't taken a biology class since 8th grade. And the people like David Foot right here, who know all about fisheries and streams and even altered systems. If you could connect this big stormwater industry to this other group of ecological restoration fisheries people, you can really make a big change. And it's being done elsewhere, like up in Chesapeake. You know, Florida hasn't found that yet. There are various approaches. But I would say connect those two big groups of professionals, change the rules in Florida so that nutrient treatment in the transportation of stormwater and stormwater ponds are ecologically enhanced. Huge change. People would love it. You just have to find some way. But I think if you put those creative people together, something will come. Yeah, I agree.
Kevin, you have the last word.
Well, I just want to thank you all for inviting me, and I thank you for your comments, and I look forward to hearing from you with other thoughts. Please get in touch with me. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing this. I keep being told, well, we don't know yet. So, you know, and that's why my comment about we need this all yesterday, and actually it's not yesterday, but it's tomorrow. But at some point FEMA says we're done. And then our opportunities are gone, at least for this disaster. But so we'll do what we can. And I thank you for your help to do that as quickly as we can. But then let's also think about what we can do to set something up for the long term, because we know it's going to happen again. And so we know we'll be back, and we know that if we can be ready for it, then institutionally ready to respond when FEMA comes knocking, when another hurricane comes knocking, then maybe we can respond better and get more.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.